Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining me here at this presentation about public speaking. I am the teacher Rodrigo Sapien. So I'm going to talk to you today about the importance of words. Now, the first thing that might come to mind is they're the most important thing, probably, or to focus on them as probably one of the best features that you could do when you're giving a speech, of course. But surprisingly, even to me, it isn't the most important thing. There's three things that you need to focus on mainly, when you're giving words away, per se. Three things. The first thing is language, of course, the words themselves. The voice, encompassing your tone of voice, the way that you say things. And the last one would be the body language, of course, when you're in front of an audience. So if you're thinking about this, which one is the most important thing? And surprisingly, the most important thing in level of importance are, just like I mentioned them, the least important thing is the language, then the voice itself, and then the body language is the most important thing. It's 55% in importance. That's the biggest thing, the biggest deal. So when I was thinking about this, a lot of people came to mind into how true this is. I remember specifically with teachers that the most important teachers I ever had seemed very secure. The ones that I remember the most or some of the ones that I remember the most seemed very secure whenever they were talking about anything, really. They had a good tone of voice, of course, but sometimes, if I think really hard about them, I can remember what they said. But the first thing that comes to mind is never what they said, but rather how they said it. When it comes to the body language and when it comes to even as far as how they came into the classroom. And I personally been to a TEDx event, and I remember clearly that the most important talks I heard were the ones that stood the tallest, that had the best posture, and the ones that moved their hands in the more accurate way, with them being embracing rather than being a distraction or a point in which they lost energy, or where you could pay attention to them instead of you could pay attention to their hands instead of them, which tends to be the wrong way to go. And of course, the most engaging people were the ones that covered the basics more with body language than the language itself. And I do remember this clearly. Think about it. Think of probably the most engaging teachers had a better body language than the ones that seemed actually more insecure. That's a big thing. Now, sometimes we think about the smaller things as not important, but sometimes the smaller things in our mind tend to be the most important. And we have to think about it with the 80-20 rule. Some of you might know what the 80-20 rule is, especially the ones who are more experienced in the world know what this is. The 80-20 rule, my father taught it to me many years ago. I was very young, and I didn't understand it until years later. And it's basically, this is what it says. 20% of your issues are 80% of your problems, or 80% of your issues are actually 20% of your problems. I apologize for the misspell that it says problemas instead of problems, but you get the point. And this is the way that this happens. Let's say that you have 10 problems that you have to solve. 2 of them are very important or very difficult, and the other 8 are not as big to solve, or not as difficult, or not as complex. So if you solve the two most important ones, you would have solved 80% of the whole problem, of 100% of your problems, if you solve only those 2, because they tend to be the bigger ones, and the other 8 tend to solve themselves for some reason. And if you look back on it, you go like, yeah, I don't even recall how I solved all that or how quick it was. It doesn't even take space in your mind. That's how this rule works. And it applies to almost anything in life, really. If you have 10 things, whatever they are, 2 of them tend to be the bigger things, and the other 8 are usually not as big. So this works in everything, and it also works here with the words, the choice of words that you make in combination with your voice and body language. So think about it. It's really interesting. And anyways, so another thing is the bad tone of voice or good tone of voice in the opposite direction. Of course, imagine somebody telling you good morning in a very angry tone. You would immediately, it wouldn't be received in the same way. Then the words actually stop being important if you think about it, right? If somebody tells you in a bad tone of voice, like good morning, or something like that. Think about coming into a business, going into a store, and there's this sales clerk that says good morning, but it sounds miserable, like this person doesn't want to be there. They prefer to be at home, watching Netflix with their cat or something like that. And you notice it and you immediately you probably want to get out of the store, because even if they said good morning, or if they told you something quote unquote nice or quote unquote polite, it doesn't feel that way. So be careful with your tone of voice. And this brings me back to teachers again. Teachers can be very passive aggressive. I am a teacher. And they could say something that sounds really nice but is really mean because they said it in a good tone of voice. So it sounds very strange. Or the other way around. They've had a horrible day, or probably some of your classmates were really difficult to deal with that day. And the teacher is just, sick of their day, and they say something in a very bad tone of voice and they make you feel horrible. So be careful with this. Always make sure to feel happy whenever you're in front of an audience, or in this case, if you're going to be a teacher, to always look, happy to do your job whenever you're in front of your students. Remember that you are playing. You're not playing, but you have the power of their minds in your hands. You're literally modifying the way they think when you are in front of your students. So be careful with your tone of voice. You're actually modifying the way they think. You're modifying their impressions. You're creating you're giving them certain feelings that either they can go either way. They could go in a good way, they can go in a bad way, and a lot of this happens because of your tone of voice. So keep that in mind all the time. Now, this brings me to my next point, of course. How important are emotions? This happens a lot in your job. At work. It's happened to me. They say that 70% of people who quit their job, they actually don't quit their job. They quit their bosses. And this happened to me in both situations. There was a job that I didn't want to quit, but I had to for personal reasons, because I was offered a different job and I had to relocate and all that good stuff. And I had a wonderful, wonderful boss, probably the best boss I ever had. And she was great. She was the principal of a school I worked at, and she made me do a lot of work because of the way she asked. And another thing, she always made me feel good about my work. She always made me feel good about what I was doing. And when she gave me feedback, she was very assertive, and she made me see her point. That's a big thing. She made me see her point. She just didn't put her point on the table. She made me see it. And I saw her be this way with all of the rest of the teachers that she was working with. And she was always very to the point, but in a very sweet way. She was always aware of how other people felt, and she was always aware of what people were going through that day. And she was not only that with the students, with the teachers, she was also like that with the students. So she was a very approachable principal, and that was a really amazing thing. She was great to work with. And on the other hand, I had a job that I remember I really wanted a position at a company I was working at. I wasn't a teacher at that time. And I finally got the job, and a month later I quit because I couldn't stand my boss. She was very difficult. I was new at that department in particular, and I had questions. And she was the only one that could answer, because there were only three of us at that department. And whenever I asked her, she always made me feel bad about asking. And she always said, I already explained it to you. Like, don't waste my time. And she was never accessible. She was never approachable. And that became an issue for me, because it was just thinking about the next day, having to go to work was torture, was mentally exhausting. So I quit. I was only able to stay there for a month. And think about this when you're in front of an audience as well. The type of emotions that you're going to transmit need to be accurate. You have to be clear what type of emotions you're going to make people feel. And you need to make sure that they feel that. whether by your body language, by what you say, by the way you say it, and also something that is a big influence in how, how you present these words is how you feel that day. If you had a bad day, people are going to notice. If you had a good day, people are going to notice. They say that you can hear a smile when somebody calls you on the phone. And that is very true. I worked in a call center for many years, and you noticed when somebody on the other end of the line was having a bad day, and they noticed when the agent who they were talking to had a bad day as well. So keep that in mind, especially if you're in front of an audience, if you're in front of a class and you're a teacher, if you're a boss and you're in a meeting, etc., etc. Remember that. Keep that in mind. And of course, choose your words wisely. The substance in your words is incredibly important. Don't go around in circles whenever you're speaking. I've seen this so many times. You can tell when a teacher has not prepared his or her class. You can tell when a speaker didn't prepare. There was this thing about the actor Anthony Hopkins preparing for a role, and it is said that he reads his script more than 200 times before he goes on set. And that's pretty amazing. And the reason why he does that is because he wants to get the learning process out of the way. He doesn't want to think about remembering his lines whenever he's on the set. So by the time he gets to the set and by the time he has to work with the director and how to actually say the lines, he knows them so well that he could do anything with them. And that's pretty amazing. And the same thing happens not only in the trade of acting, but it also happens, with teachers. And it should also happen with public speakers. And it should also happen with a boss that's going to be, giving a presentation or directing a meeting, with the employees of a company and so forth and so on. So all of this is very important. Don't go around in circles by repeating words. I've seen this a lot. You can notice that. I've seen, teachers who were my teachers go around in circles, and you would notice like this person has no idea what they're talking about. Or the other way around. I've seen, coworkers, other, colleagues, other teachers who actually go into class and have no idea what they're talking about. They may have good body language, and sometimes the students believe it, which is very dangerous in my point of view. But you can tell that they haven't done their homework, their proper homework. A teacher does a lot of homework beforehand. The student does the homework afterwards. But the thing is, you have to prepare your words, whatever it is you're going to say. So always think about that. Be careful. Now, the other important thing, of course, is that you're going to be talking with humans. You're a human, they're humans, and you should never forget that. There's this idea of course, I understand stage fright. I've been on stage many times, whether I've been a theater actor for many years, so I know what it's like to be in front of an audience. It's very intimidating. I've also been in front of an audience as a musician. I've been as a public speaker and also as a teacher for more than 15 years. So I know the feeling about an intimidating audience. But, after a long time of actually being in front of an audience, I understood that the other people are humans, and that they're going to embrace whatever it is you're going to say. And that's why it's so important to have good ethics and give them the right information. But they are humans, and they're going to respond to impulses. They're going to respond to emotions. They're going to respond they're going to react to whatever it is you give them. So make sure to get the right reaction. And a lot of reactions, not all of them, but a lot of reactions are what's the best word? Probably malleable, I guess, for lack of a better word. But you can actually work with people's reactions and emotions, in a positive way, of course. Because I saw this thing I saw this speaker once that made a mistake. A lot of people are afraid of making mistakes when they're doing public speaking or when they're teaching or whatever it is, whenever they're in front of an audience. And there was this public speaker once. It was absolutely charming, but this guy made a mistake and it was extremely noticeable. And he embraced it. He laughed and he apologized, and people actually reacted really well to it because of his honesty. And I can say that the talk got better after he made the mistake and he embraced it, because people saw a human in front of them and he humanized himself in front of them. So it became a very honest talk and people connected with it a lot better. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. It could be a positive thing if you know how to use it in your favor. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. People are going to respond way better than you think in most cases. And I'm going to leave you with this thought of Tierney. She says, I love this long quote. She says, like all good movies or books, a great talk is transporting. We love to go on adventures, travel someplace new with an informed, if not quirky, guide who can introduce us to things we never knew existed, incite us to crawl out windows into strange worlds, outfit us with new lenses to see the ordinary in an extraordinary way, enrapture us and engage multiple parts of our brains simultaneously. So often try to fashion my talks around embarking on a journey. Tierney. So think about this. This is very interesting. Her focus or her approach to giving talks is by taking the audience through a journey, making them travel with their minds, go on a beautiful voyage. And if you think about it, the best talks or the most interesting talks that you've ever had in front of you probably had an anecdote, probably had an adventure, probably had a story. And if it didn't, they still made it feel like a story. And it takes a long time to do this, but the best way to do it is to do it over and over and over again until it becomes interesting, and it is possible. So anyways, I hope this helped you a lot. Thank you very much. Make sure to leave a comment, or if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Have a good one.